And hi, everybody on YouTube and Twitch. And I'm also on Discord and and TikTok. There's not much that we can say about Empire right now except the fact that we have to do something. Every single choice we make leads us to a kind of understanding of who we are, what we're doing in this world, what our purpose is in this world. And thank you so much. Yay, the goal is down to 80. Just a reminder, I do these readings for free. So please, if you can. The tip goal is 80. For today, well, every day it is 90. And if I don't meet it, it's fine. If I do, yay. And so, yeah, we have the goal and the pay links in the bio. So, we are on week 3 of reading The Architecture of Modern Empire, which is Arundhati Roy in conversation with David Barsamian. White people names confuse me. And Arundhati Roy is a writer and an activist who doesn't make any bones about what she believes in. And it's one of the things I absolutely love about her. Not just not making any bones about what she believes in, but she doesn't just say it outright. She says it eloquently. She says it gracefully. And who has not heard of Arundhati Roy? She wrote my favorite fiction book of all time, which is The God of Small Things. And, well, I would say my favorite non-fantasy. My favorite fantasy trilogy is His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. Roy is also communist and grew up in Kerala, and anybody who knows anything about India, Kerala is essentially the communist province of India. And here she's talking about how empire works through gatekeeping knowledge, through making access to information scarce, through terror, through narratives that scare people. And so we don't have much say in what happens behind closed doors. And that's part of the reason I really like the song from Hamilton, The Room Where It Happens, or The Room Where It Happened. We just assume that it happened, but no one else is in the room where it happens. We have a weird sense of, yeah, things get done. We just don't know how. We don't know who is in those rooms. We don't know what decisions are made and why. We just get told these are the decisions that have been taken about our lives, about our futures, about our existence. And so she's talking about how these systems are built. And if you can get hold of Arundhati Roy's books, please do, because she is a brilliant writer and a wonderful mind. So we get to chapter 2. If you are following along, it is page 25. So this text is based on 2 interviews conducted in Albuquerque, New Mexico and Las Vegas, Nevada on September 19th and 29th of 2002. Chapter 2, Terror and the Maddened King. So he asks, it's been 19 months since our last interview. Can you update me on the criminal case filed against you in a district magistrate's court in Kerala for your book, The God of Small Things? The charge was corrupting public morality. What was the outcome of that particular case? She was laughing about the case in the previous interview, saying that, people are just silly. Response. Well, it hasn't had an outcome. It's still pending in court. But every 6 months or so, the lawyer says, there's going to be a hearing. Can you please come? This is one of the ways in which the state controls people. Having to pay a lawyer or having a criminal case in court, never knowing what's going to happen. It's not about whether you get sentenced eventually or not. It's the harassment. It's about having it on your head, about not knowing what will happen. And I think that is a powerful thing. Constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that is what being a colonized person is like, because we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like getting an opportunity. What is going to be the cost? Doing the right thing. What is going to be the cost? Being involved in something great. What is going to be the cost? We are constantly asking ourselves as colonized people, as people of the global majority, what is it going to cost us? Is pandering to the system going to cost us our family and our traditions and our language? What is the price we pay for acceptance in the corporate world, in the academic world? When we take on the language of the colonizer, what does it cost us? Because everything has a price for colonized people. And this is one of them. This is absolutely one of them. The cost of having an opinion is you constantly have these kinds of things looming over your head. IB. Question. More recently, you've been charged and found guilty of contempt of court by India's Supreme Court, apparently in response to your criticism of its decision to allow construction to proceed on the Narmada Valley Dam project. You could have been sentenced to 6 months in jail, but they gave you a symbolic 1-day sentence and a small fine. This is not really a question. A lot of the time, what he does is, say the random question, the random statement prompting a response. Response. It's McCarthyism, a warning to people that criticizing the Supreme Court could jeopardize your career. You'd have to hire lawyers, make court appearances, and eventually you may or may not be sentenced. Who can afford to risk it? And that is the question. Who can actually afford to risk that? What is going to be the cost of somebody brown or somebody who is of an indigenous community, somebody black, going into a workspace and wearing a kufiya? What is that going to cost them? Thank you so much, Sean. What is the price they're going to have to pay for wearing a kufiya to work? Question. Tell me about Aradhana Seth's film called Damage. Answer. Usually when people ask me to make films with them, I refuse. The request to do Damage came just after the final Supreme Court hearing, when it became pretty obvious to me that I was going to be sentenced one way or the other. I didn't know for how long. I was pretty rattled, and thought that if I was going to be in jail for any length of time, at least my point of view ought to be out in the world. In India, the press is terrified of the court. So there wasn't any real discussion of the issues. It was discussed in a cheeky bitch taken to court, sort of cheap sensationalist ways, but not seriously. After all, what is contempt of court? What does this law mean to ordinary citizens? None of these things that had been discussed at all. So I agreed to do the film because I was nervous and wanted people to know that what this debate was about. Question. In a moving segment of the film, you discuss a man named Bhaji Bhai. Can you talk about him? Answer. Bhaji Bhai is a farmer in Gujarat from a little village called Arundhati. When I first met him, I remember thinking, I know this man from somewhere. I'd never met him before. Then I remembered a friend of mine who had made a film on the Narmada years before had done an interview with Bhaji Bhai. He had lost something like 17 of his 19 acres to the irrigation canal in Gujarat. And just because he'd lost it to the canal as opposed to submergence in the reservoir area, he didn't count as a project-affected person. He wasn't compensated. So he was pauperized. And that is an important word, pauperized. He was made poor. He didn't descend into poverty, as a lot of the language is framed around people who become poor. It's like you become poor as if it's a passive thing. That's a new word for Alma. Yes, pauperized. Somebody who is made poor by circumstances outside of their own doing. We say that person was traumatized. The thing is that even in saying something like pauperized or traumatized, the action is still on the person. Who was that person pauperized by? That person was pauperized by government and developers. Pauperized by capitalism, by capitalists, by people capitalizing off of other people's labor and land. Who was that person traumatized by? I was traumatized by my rapist. He had spent I don't know how many years telling strangers his story. I was just another stranger that he told his story to, hoping that someday someone will intervene and right this great wrong that had been done to him. Question. Women seem to be central to the struggle in the Narmada Valley. Why do you think women are so actively engaged there? Answer. Women are actually actively engaged in many struggles in India, and especially in the Narmada Valley. In the Maheshwar Dam submergence villages, the women of the valley are particularly effective. Women are more adversely affected by uprootment than men. Among the Adivasi people, it is not the case that men own the land and women don't. When the Adivasis are displaced from their ancestral lands, the meager cash compensation is given by the government to men. The women are completely disempowered. Many are reduced to offering themselves as daily laborers on construction sites, and they are exploited terribly. Women often realize that if they are displaced, they are more vulnerable and therefore understand the issues in a more visceral and deeper sense than men do. And this is absolutely true of any any targeted or marginalized group of people. The women always suffer a hell of a lot more. Question. You write in your latest essay, Come September, that the theme of much of what you talk about is the relationship between power and powerlessness. And you write about the physics of power. I'm interested that you use that term, physics. It connects with the mathematical term you used in another of your essays, the algebra of infinite justice. My copy of the algebra of infinite justice is signed, and I got to speak with her, and I love her so much. And then years later, I got my copy of The God of Small Things, signed by her as well. Anyway, I digress. What do you have in mind there? Now, this is about the term physics. She uses mathematical terms. She uses terms that are rooted in what is seen as objectivity. Algebra, physics. Answer. Unfettered power results in excess, such as the ones we're talking about now, and eventually that has to lead to structural damage. I'm interested in the physics of history. Historically, we know that every empire overreaches itself and eventually implodes. Then another one rises to take its place. Yee! Aren't you excited? That is the W, honestly. What in the world is that? Oh, coaster. Yeah, it's an English word. Question. But do you see those excesses as inherent in the structure of power? Are we talking about something inevitable here? Response. Inevitable would be too fatalistic a term, but I think unfettered power does have its own behavioral patterns, its own DNA, and that is the inevitable, but put in a less fatalistic way, in a less nihilistic way. Thank you. But it is that physics. It is built into the DNA. It is built into the very structure of how power works, how power operates. When you listen to George Bush speak, it's as though he has no perspective because he's driven by the crazed impulse of a maddened king. He can't hear the murmuring of his servants' quarters. He can't hear the words of the world's subjects. He's driving himself into a situation and cannot turn back. Yet, just as inevitable as the journey that the powerful undertake is the journey undertaken by those who are engaged in the business of resisting power. Just as power has a physics, those of us who are opposed to power also have physics. Sometimes I think the world is divided into those who have comfortable relationships with power and those who have a naturally adversarial relationship with power. And it really is about how you fit in to that system of power. What is your relational position in terms of power? What is your positionality? Question. You've just spent a couple of weeks in the US. You spoke in New York and Santa Fe and took a driving trip through parts of New Mexico. What do you think about the incredible standard of living that Americans enjoy? Forgive me while I choke to death. And the price that is extracted from the developing world to maintain that standard of living. I want to know from y'all, Americans, what is your standard of living? Answer. It's not that I haven't been to America or to a Western country before, but I haven't lived here, and I can't seem to get used to it. I haven't got used to doors that open on their own when you stand in front of them, or looking at supermarkets stuffed with goods. But when I'm here, I have to say that I don't necessarily feel, oh, look how much they have and how little we do. Because I think Americans themselves pay such a terrible price. Yes. I've been to the US once, and I'm glad I did. Because it made me understand a hell of a lot more about how we exist in relation to each other. We have we have shops here that are these mass-produced fast fashion kind of places and whatnot that are local, or a lot of stuff made in China. We also have a store that sells at cost, just above cost. things that are made of plastic. Like, you can buy these in bulk, these little containers. You can buy them in bulk in those places. It's called Plastic Land. I started calling the US Plastic Land because everything is enveloped in a layer of plastic. Everything is single use. I went to a Whole Foods that's supposed to be one of the more sustainable places. There were peeled oranges wrapped in plastic. Oh no, if only oranges came in their own natural peel that, did the preservation thing. Instead, they have to wrap it in plastic. The people saying, "Hey, how are you?" Not even waiting for a response. It's plastic. And that kind of culture is extending to places where US cultures and subcultures are prolific, or have proliferated society, I should say, to the extent that a lot of South Africans are becoming like that. Hey, how are you? I don't get it. And I probably never will. And Americans do pay such a high price. The American price of the standard of living that you have there. I mean, people are barely making it. But barely making it for what? A roof over your head, that's one. A car, because public transport systems don't work. Or if you have public transport systems, they're hella expensive. The lifestyle that is sold as the only way to live. And the price you pay is hours of your life. Time with your kids. Sharing community. It's not just the high cost of living, where you pay for a place like this. People couldn't afford the rent. Forget owning a house. So he asks, in what way? Answer, in terms of emotional emptiness. Watching Michael Moore's film Bowling for Columbine, you suddenly get the feeling that there's a country with an economy that thrives on insecurity, fear, threats, protecting what you have, your washing machine, dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, from the invasion of killer tomatoes or evil women in saris or whatever other kind of alien, a culture under siege. Every person who gets ahead by stepping on his brother or sister or mother or friend. It's a sad, lonely, terrible price to pay for creature comforts. I think people here could be much happier if they let their shoulders drop and say, I really don't need this. I don't have to get ahead. I really don't have to win the baseball match. I really don't have to come first in class. I really don't have to be the highest earner in my little town. There are so many happinesses that come from just loving and companionship, and even losing. Let's see. As a Canadian, the poverty I've seen in US cities rival those of northern remote reservations. Watched a documentary about Detroit and how the pizza comes more quickly than emergency services. I have beef with Detroit, by the way. And those kinds of joys, it comes with community. Not just the nuclear family. What does it mean to share community, be in community with other people? Assalamu alaikum, Fatima. There's too few people here, baby. You write in your essay come September that the Bush administration is cynically manipulating people's grief after September 11th to fuel yet another war, this time against Iraq. You're speaking about Iraq and also Palestine. Why? She says, why not? I need loving and companionship, but I need a roof too. Yes. And what does it mean to Americans when I constantly say, as long as I am alive, no matter where I am in the world, you will have a home? What does that make you feel? Answer that honestly. Question. But you know that there are those stories that are very difficult for most Americans to hear. There's not a lot of sympathy in the US for Palestine, or for the Iraqis for that matter. Answer. But the thing is, if you're a writer and you're not polling votes, I'm not here to tell stories that people want to hear. I'm not entering some popularity contest. I just say what I have to say, and the consequences are sometimes wonderful and sometimes not. But I'm not here to say what people want to hear. Question. Let's talk a little bit about the mass media in the US. You write that thanks to America's free press, sadly, most Americans know very little about the US government's foreign policy. Answer. Yes. It's a strangely insular place, America. When you live outside it and you come here, it's almost shocking how insular it is, and how puzzled people are, and how curious. Now I realize about what other people think because it's just blocked out. Before I came here, I remember thinking, when I write about dams or nuclear bombs in India, I'm quite aware that the elite in India don't want to know about the dams. They don't want to know about how many people have been displaced, what cruelties have been perpetrated for their own air conditioners and electricity. Because the ultimate privilege of the elite is not just their deluxe lifestyles, but deluxe lifestyles with a clear conscience. And I felt that this was the case here too. Maybe people here don't want to know about Iraq or Latin America or Palestine or East Timor or Vietnam or anything, so that they can live this happy little suburban life. But then I thought about it. Supposing you're a plumber in Milwaukee or an electrician in Denver, you just go to work, come home, work really hard, and then you read your paper or watch CNN or Fox News and you go to bed. You don't know what the American government is up to, and ordinary people are too tired to make the effort to go out and really find out. So they live in this bubble of lots of adverts and no information. I was absolutely horrified when I saw Times Square for the first time. I was horrified to see all of those advertisements. And at the end of the reading, I'm going to read you something that I wrote. It is lots of advertisements and no information. That's exactly it. Question. Third World Resurgence, an excellent magazine out of Penang, Malaysia, had a recent article on the Bhopal disaster of 1984. More than 500,000 people were seriously injured and some 3,000 people died on December 3rd, 1984, when a cloud of lethal gas was released into the air from Union Carbide's Bhopal facility in central India. More than 20,000 deaths have since been linked to the gas. Response. The article features a leader among Bhopal survivors named Rashida B. You can tell from the name she's Muslim, who lost 5 members of her immediate family to cancer after the disaster, and she herself continues to suffer from diminished visions, headaches, and panic. At the Earth Summit in Johannesburg a few weeks ago, Rashida tried to personally hand over a broom to the president of Dow Chemical, which has now taken over Union Carbide, and here's what she said. The Indian government has received clear instructions from its masters in Washington, D.C. The Indian government has made it clear to us, that is the victims, that if it comes to choosing between holding Dow Chemical or Union Carbide liable for punishing Warren Anderson, who was the CEO of Union Carbide, and deserting the Bhopal survivors, it would opt for the latter without batting an eyelid. Even the absurd compensation that the Indian courts agreed upon for the victims of Bhopal have not been reimbursed over the past 18 years, and now the government is trying to use that money to pay into constituencies where there were no victims of the Bhopal disaster. The victims are primarily Muslim. But now they're trying to pay that money to Hindu-dominant constituencies to look after their vote banks. Jesus fucking Christ is correct. Question. You were speaking to some students in New Mexico recently and advised them to travel outside the United States. I tell people all the time, if you have access to travel, please do. Get out of the bubble. Get out of plastic land. To put their ears against the wall and listen to the whispering. What did you have in mind giving them that kind of advice? Answer. That when you live in the US with the roar of the free market and the huge military power, the roar of being the heart of empire, it's hard to hear the whispering of the rest of the world. And I think many US citizens want to. I don't think all of them necessarily are co-conspirators in this concept of empire. And those who are not need to listen to other stories in the world, to other voices, to other people. Question. Yes, you do say it's difficult to be a citizen of empire. You write about September 11th. You think that the terrorists should be brought to book, but then you ask the question, is war the best way to track them down? Will burning the haystack find you the needle? Response. Under the shelter of the US government's rhetoric about the war against terror, politicians the world over have decided that this technique is their best way of settling old scores. So whether it's the Russian government hunting down Chechens, or Ariel Sharon in Palestine, or the Indian government carrying out its fascist agenda against Muslims, particularly in Kashmir, everybody's borrowing the same rhetoric. They're all fitting their mouths around George Bush's bloody words. After the terrorist attack on the Indian Parliament in December 13, 2001, the Indian government blamed Pakistan with no evidence and moved all its soldiers to the border. War is now considered a legitimate reaction to terrorist strikes. Now, through the hottest summers, through the bleakest winters, we have 1 million armed men on hair trigger alert, facing each other on the border between India and Pakistan, threatening each other with nuclear annihilation. So in effect, terrorists now have the power to ignite war. They almost have their finger on the nuclear. They almost have their finger on the nuclear button. They almost have the heads of state. And this has enhanced effectiveness and romance of terrorism. The US government's response to September 11th has actually privileged it. It's the only effective way to be heard. Over the years, every kind of non-violent resistance movement has been crushed, ignored, kicked aside. But if you're a terrorist, you have a chance of being negotiated with, of being on TV, of getting the attention you wouldn't have dreamed of earlier. It's funny. Oslo just came in. Oslo's shirt from curiousredmonster.com. I bought one. It says, "The fight for civil rights is not a civil fight." One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Question. When Madeleine Albright was the US ambassador to the United Nations in 1994, she said of the United States, quote, "We will behave multilaterally when we can and unilaterally when we must. I was wondering, in light of the announcement last week on September 17th of the Bush Doctrine about preemptive war, if that may not be used as legitimacy for, let's say, India to settle scores with Pakistan. Let's say the BJP government in New Delhi says, we have evidence that Pakistan may attack us and we will launch a preemptive strike. Response. If they can borrow the rhetoric, they can borrow the logic. If Bush can stamp his foot and insist on being allowed to play out insane fantasies, then why shouldn't Prime Minister A.B. Vajpayee or General Pervez Musharraf in Pakistan? In any case, India does behave like the US of the Indian subcontinent. That's powerful. India behaves like the US of the subcontinent. What does that say about the US? Bullies. Question. You know the old extension, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Maybe terrorist is the same thing. I'm thinking, for example, Yitzhak Shamir and Menachem Begin were regarded by the British as terrorists when they were controlling Palestine, and today they're national heroes of Israel. Nelson Mandela was considered for years to be a terrorist too. Response. In 1987, when the UN wanted to pass a resolution on international terrorism, the only two countries to oppose that resolution were Israel and the US, because at the time they didn't want to recognize the African National Congress and the Palestinian struggle for freedom and self-determination. Thank you. Yeah. And that is why we always say Palestine and South Africa, one and the same. How are you, darling? Question. Since September 11th, particularly in the US, the pundits who appear with boring regularity on talk shows invoke the words of Winston Churchill, greatly admired for courage. He's the kind of model rectitude to be emulated. In Come September, you have an unusual quote from Winston Churchill that does not get heard anywhere. Can you paraphrase it? Breathing. Yep. Response. He was talking about the Palestinian struggle and basically said, I do not believe that the dog in the manger has the right to the manger simply because he has lain there for so long. I do not believe that the red Indian has been wronged in America or the black man has been wronged in Australia simply because they've been displaced by a higher, stronger race. And he said this in 1937, I believe. Yes. People who like Churchill, fuck off. Please. Go choke on big floppy donkey dick. Question. You conclude your essay, War is Peace, by wondering, have we forfeited our right to dream? Will we ever be able to reimagine beauty? Response. That was written in a moment of despair. But we as human beings must never stop that quest. Never. Regardless of Bush or Churchill or Mussolini or Hitler or whoever else. We can never abandon our personal quest for joy, beauty, and gentleness. Of course, we're allowed moments of despair. We would be inhuman if we weren't, but let it never be said that we gave up. Sometimes it's hard not to feel like it's pointless. What, Sean? Question. Vandana Shiva, who's a prominent activist and environmentalist in India, told me a story once about going to a village and trying to explain to people what globalization was doing to people in India. Oh, yeah. It's something I say quite often about people who lick boots. They didn't get it right away, but then somebody jumped up and said the East India Company has come back. So there's that memory of being colonized and recolonized now under this rubric of corporate globalization. It's like the Sahibs are back, this time not with their pith helmets and swagger sticks, but with their laptops and flowcharts. Response. We ought not to speak about the economics of globalization, but the psychology of globalization. It's like the psychology of a battered woman being faced with her husband again and again and being asked to trust him again and again. That's what's happening. We are being asked by the countries that invented nuclear weapons and chemical weapons and apartheid and modern slavery and racism, countries that have perfected the gentle art of genocide. Fucking hell, this woman. I love her so much. If you are from Haymarket Books and you know how I can go about interviewing this woman, please, anybody from Haymarket Books watching this video, if you are, I don't know if you ever will, please give me a chance to interview Arundhati Roy. Perfected the gentle art of genocide that colonized people for centuries to trust them when they said they believe in the level playing field and equitable distribution of resources and a better world. It seems comical that we should even consider that they really mean what they say. Question. In Damage, there's an incredibly moving scene where the Supreme Court in New Delhi is surrounded by people who have come from the Narmada Valley and elsewhere, chanting your name and giving you support. There was just so much love and affection, and tears came to your eyes, and as I recount it, I'm getting chills myself. It was beautiful. Response. I was scared that day. Now that it's over, it's okay to say what I'm saying, but while it was happening, I was surrounded by police. And while I was in prison, even though I was in prison for a day, it was enough to know how helpless one can be. They can do anything when you are in prison. I knew the people from the Narmada Valley had come. They hadn't come for me personally. They came because they knew that I was somebody who said with no caveats, I am on your side. I wasn't hedging my bets like sophisticated intellectuals saying, on one hand this, but on the other hand that. I was saying, I am on your side. So they came to say, we are on your side when you need us. I was touched by this because it's not always the way people's movements work. People don't always come out spontaneously onto the streets. And one of the things about resistance movements is it takes a great deal of mobilization to keep a movement together and to keep them going to do things for one another. There are so many different kinds of people putting their shoulders to the wheel. It's not as though all of them have read The God of Small Things. It's not as if I know how to grow soybeans, but somewhere there is a joining of minds and a vision of a world. And that is the chapter. Any questions? Well, if there are no questions, I shall end here. To Twitch and YouTube, I will end here first for you guys. I shall see y'all tomorrow, maybe. No, tomorrow definitely, actually, because my lecture ends at 8. Yeah. I'll see y'all tomorrow, and please consider donating to my pay links because, you know, a bitch be poor. See y'all then.